If the $30 billion space station Freedom is grounded, Hamilton Standard will be forced to cut 400 jobs next year and will lose $300 million in contracts by the end of the decade. Its Space and Sea division developed and manufactured this spacesuit, which is used during shuttle missions and allows astronauts to work in space.
I really think that this brings a halt to 30 years of continued research and development and leadership by the United States in the space program. I've had friends of mine both in Washington and Houston say that if this stops, it'll be 15 years before we get the momentum back to get the program back on course.
More than 1,200 employees spent their lunch hour in the hot sun signing a petition urging Congress to reinstate the $2 billion that was cut from the space station program.
The toughest votes that will be cast on this budget is the vote on space, because it does force that long-term view into direct confrontation with shorter-term interests.
Besides jobs, our nation's space superiority is at stake if the space station program is terminated.
There are also some very important scientific experiments that can't be conducted without this space station.
Some of the research that would be done in space involves the development of medicines and the study of crystal growth for computer applications. The battle to restore the space program's funding is a winnable one, according to Representative Nancy Johnson, but it's a bit of a fight against time. The House of Representatives is expected to vote on the space station funding next week. In Windsor Locks, I'm Kathy Callan, reporting for the 10 o'clock news.
Our involvement, Congresswoman Johnson, who had the vision and
that range.
Senator O'Leary's plan could be called an income tax for the rich. They're the ones who will be paying. Individuals would pay a 9% tax on income over $75,000, and couples would pay the same amount on earnings over $100,000. The plan keeps a sales tax at 8% and maintains the same taxes on dividends, interest, and capital. For businesses, it reduces the corporate tax from 13.8% to 10%.
I think to ask a man or woman who's making $200,000 a year to pay an effective $6,000 income tax to the state of Connecticut is not asking a great deal at all.
Most lawmakers are still reviewing the plan, but already it appears to be unpopular.
Based on what is there, I could not support an income tax on the very limited amount of information that's given us.
On the House side, representatives from both affluent and middle-class communities have concerns about the tax plan.
I'm pleased with Senator O'Leary's plan to the extent that I think it adds something new to the process. On the other hand, I think there's always the danger of going too far and driving wealth out of the state of Connecticut, and I certainly oppose that.
This one happens to focus primarily on wealthy individuals or individuals with incomes over $100,000. So that's not one that I necessarily favor initially.
But don't expect Senator O'Leary's or any other tax plan to be passed by Wednesday's deadline. Lawmakers say the tax package is just too important of an issue to push through in the final hours, so they're planning on some long debates during this summer's special session. In Hartford, I'm Kathy Callan, reporting for the 10 o'clock news.
He's running. Got a runner.
I noticed. Gentleman known to me he's had past drug involvements. He started off in a run. He ducked down by the bushes, then took off, chased him back around the buildings, finally ended up in the parking lot where he was arrested after he dumped his marijuana and his money.
This guy got marijuana from him.
No,
There's
not
more.
from me, yo.
From you, yo.
Just retraced the footsteps, and we found a handgun, which was loaded and ready to go, safety off.
Somebody was serious. It's a Beretta 380.
What goes through your mind now that you know this guy has a loaded Beretta?
You don't know.
You're chasing him.
Yeah, but you don't know.
But now, what are you thinking?
Good thing he didn't shoot me.
How much crack went out the window?
About $3,500.
$3,500 worth?
How many bags did you eat?
You swallowed?
How many bags did you swallow?
How many did you swallow?
2.5 bundles.
2.5 bundles?
On a dead run.
This is more or less like a competition. It's like a game, you know, but not in a game like, you know, like, boom, last quarter's over, everybody goes home. You know, this is a game that's for keeps.
Who's winning the game?
Well, I don't know. Statistically, I'd say I am.
Who's got to play by rules, though?
You know, yeah. See, that's the thing. See, he has rules. I don't. I can do anything that I want to do.
What's the action like out here on Blackwell Street?
Pretty. It's actually a lot of action. It's getting worse than it was before, you know. You can't stop someone that's going to sell drugs. They just come right back, you know. I mean.
He got you, though.
He got me, but you ain't gonna catch me again.
We just heard one gentleman tell us that he views you as the opponent, and this is a game. What do you think about that?
That's what a lot of the people that we arrest seem to think. There's money to be made in narcotics. There's money to be made selling drugs. I don't know what the answers are. I think the answers are more law enforcement patrols such as this.
Well, we get a firearm off the street. Anytime you get a gun off the street, it's a good feeling because it's something that somebody can get hurt with. You know, but as far as anything else, I don't worry about it because if he gets time, if he doesn't get time, you know, I did my job.
We got a gun off the street, possibly prevented someone from getting killed. Maybe a cop, maybe a citizen. The word is definitely on the street that we've been out. And maybe it will make a little impact. The word is definitely on the street that we've been out.
In a move designed to block construction of a $50 million gambling casino on the Mashantucket Pequot Reservation in Ledyard, Connecticut state senators today voted 18-17 to outlaw charitable Las Vegas nights gambling. Lawmakers in favor of the legislation hope it will send a clear message to the federal courts, a message that Connecticut residents do not want gambling.
Not the governor, not the legislature, not the administration, not all the police in the world can stop organized crime from infiltrating casino gambling.
This comes as tribal leaders pledge $1 million of aid from casino receipts annually to the ailing southeastern Connecticut economy, a move which legislators from that area call positive.
People in my area are supportive of casino gambling, I believe, because they've seen what this tribe can do. And as I said, they have been good neighbors.
They're not out to corrupt society. This is a big charity for the tribe, and we can use this for the benefit of everybody. If the legislature would understand that. And
Governor Weicker, asking the General Assembly to pass today's legislation, is worried about corruption and organized crime infiltrating the Ledyard area. But southeastern lawmakers today say that wouldn't be the case.
My experience with the way that these people run their operations, I can guarantee you that organized crime will never get 1 inch of a foothold into the Mashantucket tribe. It will not happen, people. They have too many centuries of honor.
The legislation now moves to the House for a vote, which could come as early as next week. In Hartford, I'm Wendy Jones, reporting for the 10 o'clock news. This 41st annual horse show, underway in Farmington, attracts riders from all over the world, all here for a worthy cause. All proceeds from this 6-day show will go to Hartford's Child and Family Services, a private nonprofit agency which provides counseling and aid to low-income Connecticut residents. Expenses from the show are kept to a minimum because it is run by volunteers, many who come back year after year.
Any of them could never have the care that's given by Child and Family Services without our volunteering.
The show attracts folks from all around the area because this is much more than just the biggest horse show in New England.
They have a whole carnival atmosphere in the back. They have rides and everything for the children. They have a petting zoo. They have camels and elephants and pony rides. Then they have all these tents here that are all people that are selling crafts and people that are selling flowers and people that are selling refreshments. And it's just a great big country fair.
What are you planning to do in the fair today?
I don't know.
We could probably have the most good year.
I don't know what I'm planning to do.
Tickets are $7 at the gate, and children under 10 are admitted free of charge. The show runs through Sunday. In Farmington, I'm Wendy Jones reporting for the 10 o'clock news.
Nearly 100 investigators continue to follow up leads and look for evidence back at the crime scene. A command center remained in place about 100 yards from the Route 6 Land and Sea Sports Shop. State police from Connecticut and Rhode Island, along with FBI agents, came and went all day. Inside the headquarters, about 5 phones and a radio dispatch were set up to coordinate the work of scores of investigators. And unlike yesterday when there were several press briefings, state police were unusually tight-lipped today, refusing to comment on the progress of the investigation. Last night, Dr. Henry Lee, the state's forensic expert, was flown in to reconstruct the path of the bullets that showered the passenger side window of Trooper Bagshaw's cruiser. Today, the medical examiner announced that Bagshaw died of a single gunshot wound to the chest. That despite the fact that he was wearing a bulletproof vest. Funeral services for Trooper Bagshaw will be held on Saturday. In North Windham, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. The 260 East Lyme High School students tested for Lyme disease both last June and November. 2 teenagers came down with the disease during the peak summer months. That's when the deer ticks that carry the bacteria are especially active. That number may not seem high, but statistically it represents 80 cases per 100,000, a ratio that is high due to the large deer tick population in the area.
Here in the Lyme endemic area, there is a risk. The risk for an individual, one person, is small, but for our community is large. Another thing we learned that was nice is of all the kids we spoke to, there was only one that had a problem of recurrent problems with Lyme disease.
100 adults were also tested, and surprisingly, 5 came down with Lyme disease. But in all those cases, doctors diagnosed the disease even before the patients were given a blood test. Doctors on the research team say that suggests area physicians are good at detecting and treating the disease. Even though the number of cases of Lyme disease here in East Lyme is about 4 times the state average, doctors aren't suggesting folks run out and get a blood test.
So right now, no, I would think that if someone visits the Lyme area, they don't need antibiotics during or afterwards, and they don't need routine blood tests.
But the research is continuing. Today marks the first day of this year's study. Once again, the doctors are recruiting volunteers from the high school. Is it something you and other students think about a lot, the possibility of coming down with Lyme disease?
No, not actually. It's never really talked about or anything. Just I saw it offered. My mom saw it. A thing came home in the mail, so she said that I should get checked out because my sister had gotten it.
The other thing learned through the study is that people are aware of the disease and are taking precautions to prevent it. Using tick sprays and checking yourself for ticks are just a couple of tips that will reduce your chances of contracting Lyme disease. In East Lyme, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. A spiraling budget deficit and an unwillingness to raise property taxes even higher forced the city of Bridgeport into filing for bankruptcy. It's a predicament these municipal leaders understand all too well as they face their own budget battles. Today they came out in support of Bridgeport by announcing they will file a friend of the court brief in federal court.
CCM believes that all Connecticut cities and towns have that legal right. Federal law allows the municipalities to avail themselves of this remedy. Nothing in the act setting up the review board for Bridgeport prohibits such a filing, and CCM maintains that no express authorization is required for a municipality to take this step when faced with financial distress.
The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities says inadequate state aid for property tax relief and education, as well as unfunded state mandates, help drive Bridgeport into bankruptcy. Because all cities face similar fiscal restraints, municipal leaders are asking lawmakers for a break in the form of property tax relief.
And there will be future Bridgeports unless state aid is especially in the area of property tax relief, is enacted by the legislature.
State funds for property tax relief ran out a year ago, leaving cities like New London to foot the bill. For the whaling city, it means a loss of $600,000.
$600,000. $600,000 is 3/4 of a mil. Our tax rate is up 1.2 mils, and thus it's 2/3 of the problem.
Municipal leaders are looking for help from a state that is struggling to close a budget shortfall of more than $2.5 billion. Nonetheless, Deputy Majority Leader Jonathan Pelto says lawmakers will seriously consider their request.
We do have legislators who are saying that they definitely want it part of the package. We have some who just don't think it's that high a priority. And so I think that having the mayors here today has helped to galvanize some legislators' belief that, yes, there does need to be some form of property tax relief. Exactly how much, what kind of tax relief is still in doubt.
While it's uncertain if or how much aid cities and towns will get, you can be sure the image of Bridgeport will remain fresh in the minds of lawmakers as they debate the issue. In Hartford, I'm Kathy Kalman, reporting for the 10 o'clock news. One by one, representatives filed off the House floor to a group of waiting lobbyists. While most of the activity takes place in the chambers, the real action is behind the scenes. That's where lawmakers are hearing about the benefits of casino gambling. Joining the ranks today was Dan Danielson, the president of the Eastern Connecticut Chamber of Commerce.
Now we have a golden opportunity to get something going for our region.
For the Indians, the casino means millions of dollars in profits and close to $10 million already sunk into the project. With that much at stake, the tribe has hired the lobbying firm of Robinson & Cole.
I think there's a lot of support that maybe opponents of the casino didn't quite realize was there.
On the other side, the governor has a handful of aides making the rounds on his behalf. New London Representative Wade Hyslop got a call from the governor's office yesterday.
The pressure is there, and you know exactly what they intend or how they want you to vote.
Legislators are making their decisions based on a variety of factors, everything from their views on gambling to their assessment of the economy.
I am personally opposed to gambling.
What it amounts to economically is a kind of a steroid, which may give us some temporary strength in Eastern Connecticut, but it's going to pervert us in the long run.
It's a fairness issue, and also I have to say that I don't think they're going to win in the courts.
From all accounts, this one is going to be close. The consensus seems to be it'll be 5 votes either way, but just which way it'll go won't be known until Thursday when the House acts on the Las Vegas 9 Amendment. In Hartford, I'm Kathy Kalman, reporting for the 10 o'clock news. The halls of the Capitol are empty and the legislative chambers are barren. The only apparent signs of life are the occasional tour group and reporters who huddle together waiting for a story. So where is all this frantic work being done during the special session? Well, here behind closed doors. Legislative leaders met this morning for about an hour and a half, and when they emerged, they announced that there still are not enough votes in the Senate to pass an income tax.
I don't believe in the Democratic Senate, and I can't speak for the House, that there is a majority of Democratic senators that will support, or 18 members that will support an income tax.
But don't write off the tax on personal income. If you talk to House leaders, those two words pop up again.
I still think the basic thrust, the centerpiece of what we do will include an income tax this next time around.
So it would seem it's back to the drawing board, or in this case, the caucus room.
We are seeking consensus. Those who have sought to work on an income tax proposal continue to do so. Those who have supported an alternative package continue to work on variations of the kinds of things that have already been seen, and some that have not been seen so far. And
legislative leaders are fairly confident that they'll have a tax package to present to the General Assembly next week. But considering the gap that still exists between the House and Senate, passing it will be a different story. In Hartford, I'm Kathy Kalman, reporting for the 10 o'clock news. When Bridgeport filed for bankruptcy, it not only jeopardized its bond rating, but also threatened its ability to complete long overdue sewer improvements. Today, State Treasurer Francisco Borges announced that Connecticut is pulling nearly $100 million in clean water funds. The reason? The bankruptcy means a default on the loan.
Bridgeport's treatment plants and sewers must be upgraded. But I cannot permit the endangerment of the rest of the clean water program because of Bridgeport's fiscal actions.
Borges vowed to work with state officials to try and find other money to complete sewer work now underway. Other state loans may also be suspended or terminated, and Borges says they are currently under review. Actions like these are aimed at protecting the state, and so far, Bridgeport's fiscal collapse hasn't hurt Connecticut's financial interests.
We have had lots of discussions with the rating agencies, and to date, they feel, and they have represented to us, that our rating will not be affected.
The outlook is not as bright for Bridgeport. Borges predicts the effects of the Chapter 9 filing will be felt for years to come.
Long term, the damage that will be done to this community is immeasurable from the perspective of reputation, its ability to borrow as it used to, its ability to attract jobs and economic development. It's going to take a long time.
In Hartford, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news.
Going on may have to stop to the extent that contractors don't feel.
Up until this afternoon, this is about all the fishing that was going on at the Niantic River. The broken railroad bridge had trapped 8 charter fishing boats in the river at a cost of about $19,000. Luckily, though, repairmen who are working on the broken main shaft were able to briefly open the bridge to let the fishing boats out. But that's after they sat idle for nearly a week.
We have no business right now. We can't get out. We have to turn everybody away and tell them not to come.
The Black Hawk 2 brings in about $1,000 a day on fishing trips to the race. But with no way out to the Sound, her crew had no work and no pay.
This is a summer job for me. I come down from North Carolina every year. But, it's just like anybody else. It's hurting everybody.
Captain Joe Wasaki has fished these waters for nearly 30 years and has endured numerous bridge breakdowns.
There's delays where the automatic switches don't work, so we lose an hour getting out, sometimes 2 hours getting out. Many times we've been locked out.
Wysocki says Amtrak has assured the fishermen that they will be reimbursed for their losses. The broken bridge also trapped about half these pleasure boats, limiting their weekend cruising to just the river.
The people were a little bit put out by it because it was a nice weekend. But the way the economy is and such, people really aren't using their boats as much as they were, and they kind of took it in stride.
Those boaters may have to spend another weekend dockside. The bridge is expected to be repaired by Saturday, but that's not definite. In Niantic, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. Smoke billowed from the bow of the 87-foot Lois Joyce as firefighters raced to extinguish the fire contained in the interior walls of the boat. The fishing boat, originally from North Carolina, had only been in the area for a couple months. Its captain, Walter Tate, a fisherman of 40 years, looked on as his livelihood went up in smoke.
Segment. Rail segment. One of those things that you have to keep going, you can't stop. Got to earn a living somehow.
A crew member was using a torch to cut a metal pipe, and that accidentally caught the boat's insulation on fire.
Some slag blew into some insulation between the walls, and that's where the fire started.
You guys all get out all right?
Yeah. We put the fire out, but it caught back up. We run some water hose on it and put the fire out, but it blazed back up.
An offshore breeze and the acrid smoke made fighting the fire difficult. A crowd of fishermen and spectators gathered to watch and sympathize for the boat's owner and its crew of 4.
It hurts. Because that's what you depend on for your living, and you have a certain amount of attachment to it.
In Stonington, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. 1,000 sailors lined the decks to witness the Fulton's final hours of naval service. Dockside crewmen who served on board at the time of her commissioning in 1941 looked on as well as speaker after speaker praised the vessel's accomplishments.
I am happy to support the Navy's recognition of the 50 years of accomplishment and achievement by USS Fulton for the submarine force. But I'm also sad because this ceremony marks the passing of an era.
The sailors themselves saluted the vessel with a hats off to the grand old lady. During a solemn moment, the ship's commissioning pennant, first hoisted 50 years ago, was taken down and presented to the Fulton's commanding officer. Then, one by one, the sailors filed off the decks, a symbolic gesture of their final departure from Fulton.
It's saying goodbye to an old friend. Fulton was a rite of passage for me. I came aboard a scared young ensign, not knowing much about anything, and the crew taught me what I needed to know.
Well, it's kind of sad to lose her after all this time.
I've found it a very interesting experience, life experience to be on a ship this old.
After the ceremony, crewmen past and present filed on board for a farewell party. The Fulton will remain in New London until October, when she'll be taken to a Virginia shipyard. Just what becomes of her then isn't yet known. In New London, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. My search for the multi-million-dollar man led me to the Beat Brothers supermarket in Montville. That's where the ticket was purchased. My theory, if they won big, they'd be back. I thought I'd go right to the machine and the women who sell the lottery tickets. What's your guess? You know who the $10 million man is?
Or woman.
A lot of, yes,
Yes.
a lot of rumors. I've heard, I think, 4 or 5 different rumors. But a lot of them
won't say if they won or not.
With no satisfaction there, I took things into my own hands and launched a search. Do you buy a lot of lottery tickets?
I sure do. Right here.
But we can confirm the fact that you are not the $10 million winner.
I am not the $10 million winner. If I was, I wouldn't be here.
No, it could be anyone.
Is it you?
Not me.
Unfortunately?
No, unfortunately. Yeah.
So what's the lowdown? Is this a lucky store or what?
Oh, we think it's a lucky store. We certainly do, and we're very happy that a customer of ours may have won the $10.6 million, I think it was.
Now, with all this talk about this lucky lotto machine, even I'm going to buy a ticket. And if I win, believe me, I'll let you know. In Uncasville, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. If the Appropriations Board had not voted to restore the beach's $1.1 million budget, there would have been no money for lifeguards and insurance, and that would mean a summer without the beach.
Now we can rest assured that we will open, and we do have our budget back in context now.
The Finance Board had slashed the park's budget to $1 and requested that it operate solely on its revenues. Last year, the fees fell a couple $100,000 short of covering the park's costs, but this year, Acting Manager Betty Gear is optimistic that revenues will rise.
As you know, a lot of the other parks and beaches have raised their prices. We fortunately kept ours at its pace right now. That's not to say that it won't go up in the future, but right now I'm hoping we're going to get a lot more from the other beaches because we are in a competitive price range now.
The Board of Education wasn't quite as lucky. Its budget was cut by nearly $1 million. That means 27 positions will be eliminated, 10 of which are here at the high school.
There's no question but that it's dealing us a heavy blow in terms of our personnel and our programs. Class sizes, obviously, will have to suffer. They will get bigger.
The cuts are across the board, targeting everything from teachers to administrators.
Again, in these difficult times, they probably did as well as could be expected.
Spared from the chopping block was the building department. Its budget had been cut from $226,000 to $1, but that was restored last night. Likewise, the Marine Commerce and Development Committee got a $20,000 boost, funds that had been cut but were put back in their budget. In New London, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. first glance, Groton's 4th of July parade was like any other as marching bands and majorettes strolled down Route 1. But this march was definitely a salute to the troops. Grand marshals for the parade were Desert Storm veterans Thelma Williams, Michael Fazzone Jr., and Frank Crandall. Not far behind was Marine Specialist John Kexel of Ledyard, who carried the flag which was presented to his family when his uncle was killed in the Vietnam War. And then there was the riderless Morgan horse, a symbol of the veterans who never made it home. And it wasn't just the marchers who displayed their patriotism. The streets were filled with flag-waving folks.
I think the war in the Gulf really encouraged people to start supporting our country.
Well, I think our boys in the Persian Gulf did a wonderful job, and this is a good time to show our appreciation to them.
And it wasn't just Groton. Towns like Columbia also dedicated their parades to the troops. But of course, there were some of your typical parade fare, such as clowns and antique cars. Over at the Seaport, the 4th was a leap back in time to a century ago. The Seaport celebrated Independence Day with a parade set in the 1870s. Even Uncle Sam could be spotted in the crowd, and following up behind were some little visitors who made their own costumes. But no Independence Day would be complete without reading from the document that granted us our freedom.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights,
in Mystic, I'm Kathy Callanan reporting for the 10 o'clock news.
What shall we render to the Lord?
For the degree of Doctor of Laws, George Herbert Walker Bush, President of the United States.
While there was rousing applause for the president, there was also protest to his visit. Some students wore white armbands and adorned their mortarboards with scornful messages. These medical school graduates questioned President Bush's position on abortion and AIDS. After receiving his degree, the president delivered an address which to some was as controversial as his visit. He announced that he will ask Congress to extend China's most favored nation trade status for another year.
If we pursue a policy that cultivates contacts with the Chinese people, promotes commerce to our benefit, we can help create a climate for democratic change.
And as the president discussed the student protest in Tiananmen Square, some Yale graduates exercised their right to freedom of expression by turning their backs on Bush and carrying placards throughout the aisles. Among those seated in the audience was Coretta Scott King, wife of slain civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. She was on hand for her nephew's graduation. And what did the graduates think of the president's speech? Well, some couldn't even hear it, and many who did were disturbed by its political nature.
I don't think it's really a proper forum for any kind of very political announcements about foreign policy. Honoring a man who's destroying the educational system in this country.
That follows news that the Bush administration will attempt to limit college tuition grants to only the poor. And what do the parents who spent thousands of dollars on their child's education think about this colorful graduation?
It shouldn't be such disturbances at graduation. If they had in a quiet way signs, fine. But this is for families a place, I mean, our political views should be held in Washington.
In New Haven, I'm Kathy Callanan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. Imogene Fuller lives just a quarter mile away from the proposed incinerator on Route 169. For 6 years, she has championed the fight against the facility, arguing that it is environmentally unsafe and simply unnecessary.
The lead and the mercury, the things that come out the stack, are not good for anybody. And the more and more you read about the environmental effects, it just is not healthy.
But project manager Belinda Lucinkis explains that the emissions go through a series of filtering processes before they are released into the air.
It is clean,
proven environmentally safe technology, and it works hand in hand with the other options out there as far as solid waste management.
Another concern is the water source to cool the plant. The company plans on digging 5 wells on their property to provide them with 500,000 gallons of water a day. But residents say that'll jeopardize both their wells and the nearby Shetucket River.
The studies that we perform show no effect on the area wells, even in a low flow situation. And that's why the DEP would even consider granting us permits for water diversion.
Wheelabrator Environmental Systems, the private company seeking to build the incinerator to make money, has even guaranteed some of the neighbors that they will take responsibility for any well problems in the unlikely case they arise. Coming out in favor of the incinerator is Lisbon's first selectman, Daniel Tepper, who views the incinerator as a safe way to dispose of trash.
After doing a fair amount of research, I feel very comfortable with the trash-to-energy plant being probably the safest means of doing or addressing the problem of the solid waste.
It'll also be a boon to Lisbon. The company will pay the town $1 million a year in lieu of taxes. Some in town say the final approval for the incinerator hinges upon the question of need. The facility must have a minimum of 425 tons of garbage a day to get the go-ahead from the state. The company says they have commitments from area towns, but some say no way. They say they have 425 as required by DEP.
I've talked to all those towns. I talked to all those towns too within the last 2 weeks. They have also letters of intent, non-binding as this one, for other towns, other incinerators to go elsewhere. Some of them have signed up with other places since I have talked with them.
The Department of Environmental Protection's decision on the permits is expected in about 3 months. In Lisbon, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. Reverend Jackson's visit to the Capitol was reminiscent of his 1988 run for the presidency. He arrived in a limousine escorted by the state police. Once inside, there were handshakes and photographs all around, but this campaign is for America's cities, in particular the bankrupt Bridgeport.
We must focus again and again right here till we get our nation's attention. We need relief. It's in the interest of America, and it's morally right.
The Reverend met briefly with the legislature's Black and Hispanic caucus, and then it was on to the governor's office for a closed-door session. Now, for those of you who suspect political motives, Jackson had this to say.
This is not a struggle for the White House. This is a struggle for our national character. This is a struggle for our national dignity.
Bridgeport lawmakers welcome Jackson's assistance because it highlights the city's economic plight.
He brings national attention, something that Bridgeport wouldn't have gotten. And like I said, he's the first national leader to be concerned.
From Hartford, it was back to Bridgeport, where Jackson began his day in a meeting with the mayor. But this stopover was not for the politicians, but rather the residents of this troubled city. The founder of the Rainbow Coalition called on men and women, blacks and whites, to march together to bail out America.
I think it would bring a lot of attention on and focus on Bridgeport and all the other urban cities in this country that is in the same situation.
I hope you do something to clear up this bankruptcy and everything, because I work for the city. I'm a school crossing guard. And when we go, we can't cash our checks, we can't do nothing. And I hope that he will clear up some of this.
So while Jesse Jackson may not be able to single-handedly bail out Bridgeport, he just may be able to rally together enough support to save the Park City. In Bridgeport, I'm Kathy Callan reporting for the 10 o'clock news. The mad dash for lunch will be a thing of the past come a week from Monday. Instead, Shipyard workers will eat lunch during a 20-minute break inside the company gates. That could drastically reduce business at Jimmy's Pizza restaurant.
Myself and others on the street that depend on EB for our living are going to hurt, and we're going to hurt bad. I don't know how I can make up 70% of my business in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and again in between shifts.
Across the street at Rags Liquorette, the story is the same.
I'm quite concerned about survival as a liquor store. I'm not concerned about survival as Jack Ragan's. I'm truly concerned for this whole area.
But the workers we spoke with favor the change, and some say it's long overdue.
I think it's good because a lot of people go out there and they get, loaded and stuff to come back here, and it's dangerous. You know what I mean, to the other people.
Some of the people that want to drink are going to drink. They'll find a way.
But local bar owners dispute claims of excessive drinking during the lunch break.
They only got 20 minutes. It's very hard for them to get more than 2 beers into them or 2 cocktails. So I don't think the people that go into the bars necessarily are drinking too much.
EB officials say the change was made to improve productivity and to allow employees to go home a half hour early. In exchange for the shortened lunch break, first shift workers will go home at 3 p.m. rather than 3:30. This is what the street looks like after lunch. Litter is strewn all along the sidewalk. And while EB doesn't mention it as one of the reasons for eliminating the lunch break, things should be a lot cleaner around here. In Groton, I'm Kathy Kalman reporting for the 10 o'clock news.